So I'm not sure if I'm the only one, but I've gotten to the point of the year where I am tired, I am worn out, I'm perhaps a little bit burnt out, and I am just crawling to the finish line. And the word I got for this morning, it comes from a very well-known story of faith, but I want to draw our attention to a very specific part this morning. So Luke 8:42-46 says, "As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. 'Who touched me?' Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, 'Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you.' But Jesus said, 'Someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me.'" So Jesus and his disciples were walking through the street, and they were surrounded by people just trying to get close to him. I picture it loud and super busy, like a Christmas Eve, Black Friday in macro. Absolutely chaos. But then this woman, with humble faith, knowing who walked among them, and with just sheer determination, does everything to reach through the crowd and touch the hem of Jesus' cloak. Just the hem. She does it, and she was healed of a 12-year affliction that no doctor or anyone could help her with. But then Jesus asks, "Who touched me?" To which his disciples are questioning him, saying, "Master, how can you ask this? You're in a crowd. Who isn't touching you?" But yet Jesus did ask, because Jesus felt her touch the hem of his cloak. It says at once he knew that power had gone out from him. In amongst a crowd, he felt her. Now, I don't think Jesus stopped everyone to ask this because he wanted to draw attention to her and the healing, but instead to show her that no matter how insignificant she might feel in a crowd, he felt her. Jesus felt her faith. Now, I don't know if you've ever done this thing where you arrive at someone's house, and then you look to the person next to you, and you're like, should we knock? Should we beep? And then you just become so anxious, and you don't know what to do, and you're like, okay, I'm just going to stare really hard at the door, and then they'll know that I'm here, and they'll open for me. Even though the host knows that you're coming. And then somebody else arrives, and then they beep or knock, and then they let you in, and you're like, oh, thank goodness. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you're probably the person that arrives and knocks afterwards, so thanks. But that's how I approach God when I was first saved. The hesitancy, the slow approach, you know what, I don't want to bother, he's the king of the universe. The barely there whisper of, God, do you hear me? Do you feel me? And yet God met me where I was. Because the host, God, always knew I was coming. And even though the way I knocked was more like a light tap, he opened the door. Scripture tells us, seek and we will find, knock and the door will be open to us. Like I said earlier, you might be tired and you say, I don't have much to give. We might find ourselves surrounded by people who are pushing into Jesus, shouting out his praises, crowding around his presence, ready to knock and beep to be let in, but you're like, actually, I don't have that in me. Actually, all I've got right now is maybe a whisper. And even though you may be whispering, let me just tell you that Scripture says he is close to the brokenhearted, and you can only hear someone whisper if you are close. He is never far. He feels you. We can approach the Father in boldness, but that doesn't always mean storming the building, tearing the roof off, breaking down the walls, and announcing our presence. That means approaching Jesus with everything you have in you and knowing that he meets you where you are. We get to approach him in boldness, but if your boldness right now is a whisper, because that is all that you have, that is okay. Maybe you might be thinking, I'm just going to ask someone else who has more strength or has a better relationship with God to pray for me. And that's perfectly fine to ask for, but let me just say that in order for the bleeding woman to get healed, she had to reach out herself, even if the touch was only the hem, because Jesus felt her faith. Your faith, no matter the size of the strength that backs it, combined with us knowing that Jesus is never out of our reach, means that a tiny touch will be enough. So even when there might be 1,000,000 prayers to him, I promise you, he hears yours. He feels yours. He feels you reach with everything you have to grasp his garment. So don't measure your prayer in comparison to somebody else's or your own strength to approach the Lord. There is boldness in a whisper. There is boldness in the touch of a hymn, if it has even a mustard seed-sized faith that backs it. Regardless of the strength of our reach, what matters is who we are reaching for. Jesus felt the touch of the woman, so don't worry about the press of the crowd. Just reach out in faith, even if your faith looks like a whisper. Thank you.